We will quickly touch on applications of verbal behavior and how we teach across the operants. There are a couple assessments that are really pertinent and focused on verbal behavior, those being the VB map and the ABLES R. We use a lot of these assessments in order to determine current levels of functioning, but also to drive programming. Important things to assess when you are examining the effectiveness of each operant would include obtaining information about the child's MAND repertoire. What behaviors does the child engage in to obtain reinforcement? When the reinforcement is provided, does the MAND behavior cease? What is the frequency and complexity of the various MAND units? So you'll see we focus quite a bit on manding and then work up from that. It's also really important to teach each operant. So in order to really understand the word shoe, we need to teach each function of shoe. So we'll teach a learner how to mand for shoe, we'll teach a learner how to label or tact shoe, we'll teach a learner how to answer a question about shoe, intraverbals, we'll teach learner to say shoe when they hear the word shoe, the echoic. So we'll teach across all operants. Our children don't naturally typically don't naturally learn every meaning of the word, so we have to specifically teach it. So we'll go over really just overall training procedures for each of these operants. However, they can become more and more complex and be individualized toward learner. So these are some tips and tricks to start out with, but by no means are the only ways to teach these operants. So manding is always one of the biggest focuses of learning with our children, especially children diagnosed with autism or other severe language delays. Again, it is the only operant that the learner receives specific reinforcement to their MO. So if I ask for something, I get what I ask. So that's our functional communication piece. We focus on this because it teaches the learner to communicate rather than engaging in maladaptive behaviors such as tantruming, aggression, self-injury, all of those behaviors that we work to decrease. We typically will use a replacement behavior of functional communication or manding to decrease those behaviors. It is typically one of the easiest operants to teach, again, because it's specific to learner. And you'll usually start with simple items in the environment that the learner wants. So food, toys, etc. Really important to avoid satiation and teach several different types of, several different mands for different items rather than just focusing on one item at all times. Manding can become difficult if learner has a small repertoire of preferred activities or items, so you'd want to work to increasing that repertoire and then teaching mands to match those items and activities that learner prefers. Echoic training is really important. Echoics are typically a type of prompt that is used in order to teach manding, tacting, or intraverbal, those higher language skills. So with an echoic, we'll typically prompt an echoic and then transfer stimulus control to a mand, a tact, or an intraverbal. So it's one of the basic teaching procedures we'll use in order to teach an echoic. We'll generally teach a best approximation and then reinforce successive approximations to that full form. So we'll use prompting, fading, shaping, all of those techniques in order to teach echoic. And what I mean with approximations, if I am teaching a learner to say cookie, and currently their best approximation is just k, I'll reinforce that until mastery, and then I will now try to teach them a better approximation of cook and then reinforce that. Once they've mastered that, then I'll go for that full form of cookie. So we're shaping the behavior. Echoics are really important and a huge focus, especially with learners that we will use vocal communication for. Tech training is also, again, with specific teaching. Typically, we use an echoic in order to prompt a tact. We'll typically start with preferred items, objects, actions, and then we will move on to prepositions, adjective, pronouns, adverbs, and so on. It can become more and more complex as the learner grows. Intraverbal training, again, really important. All of the operants are important, but this is our communication, so our ability to respond to the verbal behavior of someone else. Um, Typically, this will come as a focus point following the mastery of manding, tacting, and some receptive responses and echoics. Um, However, really simple early on introverbals, you may start pretty quickly. The most common introverbals that we start with are fill in the blanks. So either through song fill in or common phrases. So like hip hip, learner says hooray. Or ABC, learner says D. Twinkle twinkle, learner says star. So that's typically how we start. And then we'll move more toward more functional responses such as, hey, what's your name? Or how old are you? So all of those personal identification type of questions. So that's very, very briefly how we work across the operants. And we want to focus pretty much on all operants and include specific teaching, especially for our really early language learners.